It's now time for us to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe today. Now, Nigeria first, no matter the cost. That was the top line out of the online meeting the central bank governor held with more than 100 representatives across Nigeria's manufacturing, healthcare and banking industries. The economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed Nigeria's over-reliance on imports. CBN governor, alongside the Ministry of Trade, Investment and Industry, are working with banking leaders to create an economic landscape that will kickstart a new Nigerian economy away from dependence on oil and imports. Arise correspondent Adefemi Akinsanya had exclusive access to the meeting and had a sit-down interview with the central bank governor, and she's here with us now. But let's take a look at the VT first.
Meetings of this magnitude are usually held at summits, but Nigerian Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele was able to reach more than 100 participants from the comfort of his own home. Unconventional measures for unconventional times. The COVID-19 pandemic has revealed Nigeria's worst-kept secret. It imports too much while producing too little.
As big as Nigeria is, we can no longer continue a regime where, as a result of COVID, countries where we used to import pharmaceuticals or healthcare materials from decide that their healthcare raw materials and products can no longer be exported from their country to Nigeria. And as a result of that, we remain totally helpless.
That's why the meeting began with representatives from the healthcare, pharmaceutical and manufacturing sectors in Nigeria, offering an opportunity to hear problems and offer solutions. The Central Bank of Nigeria, supported by the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, have rolled out stimulus packages, including a 1 trillion naira scheme for manufacturers with single-digit interest rates on repayment. The money is for the import of capital items, land acquirement and backward integration. But manufacturers say more needs to be done to level the playing field so they can compete effectively.
We have a situation where importers, even as we speak, are clamoring for a 0% on duty. In one phase, CBN is giving money to manufacturers to expand capacities and to add new lines to their businesses. And manufacturers are ready to do that. But in another breath, people are clamoring and are advocating for zero duty, but that leaves manufacturers at complete disadvantage to compete. As it were, with a 20% duty on imported pharmaceutical products, manufacturers are not in a position to compete effectively.
In response, Emefiele says plans are already in place to prioritize Nigerian manufacturers.
It is unfair on you that you produce items locally when you are supposed to be selling your items and you should be given the preference to sell your items, that unfortunately you are unable to sell your items because of zero duty on import alternatives. So what is my suggestion? My suggestion will be that you do a letter to the Ministry of Industries, Trade and Investments, and let me have a copy of the letter, and copy it also to Minister of Finance. We should be able to talk and follow through on your behalf to the fiscal, to the ministries to say, listen, these items are currently being produced in Nigeria. Why are you according zero duty for the importation of these items into Nigeria? Because it makes the locally made alternatives uncompetitive in pricing. We will push that and we will achieve that, I can assure you. So if there are some of you that are indulging in importing items that can be produced locally to the disadvantage of those being produced locally, I will advise that we please stop the practice, because our preference is to allow the local industries to thrive.
And that's where the second meeting with banking and business leaders came in. Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, says it's time for Nigeria to put action behind her word.
Well, no, since 1978, we've been talking about the diversification of the economy, which I believe we have not actually been very serious about, because people always believe that there is a lot of foreign exchange that, that's available. So they don't really need to go and produce anything locally.
Bankers have offered access to loans, but there are conditions.
We also don't want to finance transactions where you are just going to increase the import bill of the country. Please don't put us in a difficult position. Don't bring us projects to refine. Truly, anything that we can do, we will do our best.
Despite the assurances, there are concerns. Among them, the possibility of cheap loans creating a delicate bubble of debt. Also, a shortage of foreign exchange could be dire. After the meeting was over, I asked the governor whether fears of dollar scarcity are justified.
The dollars that we used to have in ample quantity will no longer come as long as we rely on crude, that they will no longer come in the size and quantum they used to come. What does that also mean? That we need to prioritize and make sure that the dollar that is available is used to import or service obligations. What does that also mean? That we must make sure that we produce those items that can be produced in Nigeria and consume what we produce in Nigeria.
On the topic of patience, the next question was naturally how long it would take for these investments to materialize into results.
With tenacity of purpose, with determination, it can be achieved in a short period. And I have no doubt in my mind this can be achieved in 3 years. What continues to agitate people's mind is after 3-4 years, when they've done this investment, when they are back into this business, how do we ensure that this is cemented? And that will now be the focus of the monetary and fiscal authorities to see to how this is cemented for the good of this country, so that the recurring incidents of reversal of policy will not happen again in Nigeria. And I can assure you that will be the next step that government will take. So, directly to your question, it will be in a short period that this can be achieved. I cannot say tomorrow, but I can tell you in 3 years, in 2 years, we will begin to see the fruit of what we're sowing today.
Well, the optimism is strong. A self-sufficient Nigeria has been a dream for many for decades. And the governor of Nigeria's central bank says, with our future in our own hands, there isn't much further to go. Adefemi Akinsanya, Arise News, Lagos.
And joining us now is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Adefemi. How are you?
Great to see you.
Good, thank you.
Good to see you.
So, that was a marathon of a meeting we were sitting at.
Certainly looked like it.
We had to turn that into a report. It feels as though there's finally going to be a time where, instead of talking about diversifying Nigeria's economy away from reliance on imports, we're finally moving into a space where we're putting our money literally where our mouth is.
Yeah.
As I said in the report, the COVID-19 pandemic unveiled our worst-kept secret. We import too much while producing too little. So the manufacturing industry is a great example of that, especially when we talk about the manufacturing of pharmaceutical products. The fact that these countries couldn't service exports like they usually do left Nigeria stranded, and that shouldn't be happening anymore. So with the central bank governor, coupled up with the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, you had the Minister, Otumba Adeniyi Adebayo, also on that call. They made sure that manufacturers were well aware that there are funds available to you that you can use to develop industry. If you need to import raw materials, you can do that. If you need to expand your factory space, employ more people, that is what we want to do, because finally we're in a position where we want to put Nigeria first.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Good to see this coming into practice.
I mean, there's no problem with dialogue, and I think it's a good move for the CBN governor to engage major stakeholders within the economy, within the manufacturing sector. But, you know, what I see so far in the management of this COVID-19 situation is a lot of fine phrases, a lot of rhetoric. We want local industry to thrive. That's very good. We want to reset the economy. That's very good rhetoric.
Yes.
And the CBN in particular has been very proactive in coming up with these rhetorics. But it's not just about motion. We need to see the movement.
Me too.
Because the players, the stakeholders in the manufacturing sector, they have thrown up a number of concerns about access to Forex,
Yes.
about the ease of doing business, about the environment. Now, that's the heavy lifting that we would like to see on both the monetary and the fiscal side. Not, drama, not theater, not rhetoric.
Sure.
Now, and when we see the results, we'll be able to measure the results. But in terms of effort and aspiration, I think that this is excellent. Because you cannot leave, a strategic sector of the economy just hanging without engaging them. And the CBN, led by Godwin Emefiele, has been doing a lot, in terms of engaging different sectors, either the SME or the banking sector or the manufacturing sector. But as they say, in popular parlance, the taste of the pudding is in the eating. So we see the enthusiasm, the aspiration, but where will all of this lead to? And what I think the CBN governor needs to do is to address the critical questions that have been raised, and step a little back from the theater, from the rhetoric.
Well, he also, sorry, I was going to say, he did also state that over the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to be seeing a lot of change coming from this. How do you analyze that? What do you see happening?
I think I'm glad you actually brought that point up, because he used the example of Nigeria ramping up its rice production a few years ago after the 2014-2015 financial crisis in Nigeria. He said that they had already been putting plans in place to heighten Nigeria's ability to produce its own food, so that when that financial crisis did hit, we were in a better position.
Yeah.
And so he says, with that example, we know that it's never too early to prepare, and we can definitely put ourselves in a position where we can do more. A really interesting part of the meeting that we heard, we had a representative from Reddington Hospital, and he says that they also need a bit more support. Ambulances, for example, when they're brought into the country, they're not registered as healthcare apparatus. They are still exempt to commercial vehicle taxes. And so he put that to the governor, and the governor did say,
that shouldn't be happening.
Definitely, every sector of the economy needs support.
It does.
And we would like to see that support operationalized. But the point that the CBN governor continues to make about diversifying the economy, I think is very important.
Definitely.
And he has been very consistent on that score. And in terms of objective, resetting the economy, we cannot fault him. Thank you very much, Adefemi.
Very welcome.
Thanks, Femi. Have a great day.
We'll take a short break now. When we return, Rotus Odire will be here to give us the update on business in Africa. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now is Rotus Odire for an update with regards to business in Africa today. Good morning, Rotus. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine, thank you. Good morning, Dr. Abati. So, after central banks making all the headlines today, after the engagement with the critical stakeholders in Abuja, Godwin Emefiele, the central bank governor, spoke with the press, in which he had a message for foreign investors, and they were, summarizing some tweets that the central bank sent at about 9:15 p.m. yesterday. The main message he was trying to send to foreign investors was that, look, if you need to repatriate your funds out of the country, we will be able to meet your needs. If you've got letters of credit, if you've got dollar obligations that you need to leave, you will be able to leave. The only thing was, he says, not everyone should be rushing to the door. It's actually in today's This Day newspaper. I like the analogy he used. He said if there's a fire in the building and everybody rushes to try to get out at the same time, there will be higher fatalities as opposed to everybody leaving in an orderly manner. So what he says was, foreign investors should understand that there's enough foreign exchange to provide to them to be able to exit the country in an orderly manner, and there shouldn't be any panic. He then pointed to the 2016 scenario, back when they had to do some dollar rationing, but everyone got their funds and were able to leave. So investors needed to hear this from the central bank governor. You have to provide, it's kind of sort of forbearance, certainty exactly, to let them know, because we're going to need those funds to come back
at some point,
into the country. So reassuring message from the central bank governor, and I think it's going to play well in the markets today.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a good thing for the CBN governor to reassure foreign investors. Because investors, they calculate risks. They talk in terms of uncertainties, and they act in their own best interest.
Yeah.
The CBN governor is asking for patience and understanding. I don't know whether that is something you can guarantee in business, in investment transactions. But what he has done is okay. It's perfectly in order. to say that, look, if you need to repatriate your funds, we would, we will support you, we will make it possible. But repatriation of funds, another word for it, in my view, I may be wrong, you can correct me, is capital flight.
Yes, it is correct.
Right? Is capital flight in our interest as an economy? Is it in our best interest
in the long
to
run,
encourage capital flight?
In the long run, I can kind of see how, like what you said, we have to be able to encourage them to come back at some point. But in the short term, of course, we are going to suffer from that in some regard.
In any case, I mean, they are not at the mercy of whatever the central bank governor says. They will make their own decisions. Yes. As we have seen, when initially the oil price crashed and the value of the currency depreciated, we saw a run, on the stock exchange in Nigeria, and we saw a flight of, portfolio investments and with implications for the strategic value of the Naira. But as far as rhetorics go, I think that, the CBN governor talking about resetting the economy, talking about, encouraging local production, talking about, building confidence
in the economy,
within the economy. I think that's good.
Yes.
That's the kind of thing that you should do. But investors are not going to look at rhetoric. They are going to look at the hard facts. Yes. And are we strong with in relation to the hard facts? That's where the challenge is.
We'll see how things.
How do you analyze it? What do you think?
Well, the thing is that we just want to make sure they don't rush out. That's the thing, because there has been, trading in the I&E window has kind of slowed. That's the investors and exporters window, where the CBN is supposed to be playing. It's kind of dwindled a bit because oil prices have fallen. But the CBN has been transparent, has told everybody that, listen, we'll get you your money. So hopefully we don't see a rush out. And again, his language was perfectly situated for that. So we'll have to see how it goes.
Certainly,
once they provide those
we
funds
will.
to them. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you,
so much.
Rosas. Have a great day.
All right.
And that is all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. And when we return, we'll be continuing with the morning show. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching The Morning Show here on Arise News. And moving on with more business updates, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael. How are you today?
It's a slightly chilly day, but at least the sun's out. And
that's good.
A bit of that optimism is actually hitting the markets right now. Asia looking relatively positive. I say relatively. There's been a second spike of COVID-19 cases in South Korea and Germany as well. So we have in this country and in Europe as well been wondering about the progress of the pandemic and when it's going to be safe to go back to work. I know you've been having similar sort of discussions where you are too. Overlooking all this were those dreadful US jobs figures on Friday. Now, the thing about them was they were absolutely dreadful. There's no question about that. And a decade of growth in terms of employment in the United States has been wiped out in a month. But this is the weird thing. They weren't exactly as bad as everybody had thought they would be. 20 million in a month is not as bad as the 22 million that analysts were expecting. So that meant that the stock markets, generally speaking, took a relatively optimistic view. Europe and we were on holiday on Friday, but we're now back and we'll see how stocks are doing at the moment. Relatively healthy as we speak. Should we talk a little bit about the background to everything, though, and the big movers? Just COVID-19 is one thing. The other thing are the US, China and trade discussions, which are inching towards phase one of this. This is going to be a long, long process. But if they do sort of start to work out, then I think you're going to find more optimism as far as the markets go. As far as Europe's concerned, not a terribly tempting menu this week. Basically, will there be a rescue plan for the weaker countries within the European Union? I mentioned the European Union to you because obviously it's Africa's largest single export market, and growth there is actually very, very important indeed. We're heading also towards a Super Friday, if I can put it like that. I know these terms are rather boring, but it's what the market's actually So we've got, and let me take you down the list, we've got US GDP figures, US retail figures on Friday, Q1. We've got UK retail figures too, and a lot of other statistics coming up in terms of corporate news. We'll be looking to Cisco and we'll be looking to Marriott Hotels this week. So once again, it's going to be a busy week, but the background to it is always these bigger things. One, the pandemic, which is pretty obvious, but also the US and China trade talks, which are going to be very, very influential in the way people think about markets this week.
Michael, thank you for these updates. Yes, the stock markets have certainly been looking a lot better. It's a bit worrying to see what is happening in South Korea and parts of Europe with the second spike in cases of COVID-19. And I wonder how that's going to play out in the UK, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced a sort of easing of the lockdown that does begin today and a full easing from the 1st of June. But joining us now for more updates, thank you, Michael. And joining us now for more updates on COVID-19 is Aaron Akerejala. Good morning, Aaron. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, Leila. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Aaron.
Yes, I'm very wet with Monday here.
Yeah, very rainy.
I must say. And let's actually start it off from some good news that actually came in yesterday. 116 Nigerians were actually airlifted from New Jersey in the United States to amongst the 700 expected to Abuja, and they've gone into quarantine at the moment. They joined another 256 last week Wednesday who left the UAE to Nigeria. So as it stands right now, the evacuation is actually well on the way, and how much can we take is the question that begs to be answered. Now, looking at some of the numbers around the world, 4.1 million, 3,152 is the actual number of COVID-19 cases we have world over, with 282,727 deaths recorded all around. As it still stands, when you look at the numbers, bringing it down to Africa, you still find out that Africa has actually recorded, as of this morning, 63,325 with 290 deaths, I beg your pardon. So you look at all this and you say to yourself, South Africa still leading. Their case right now is at 10,015. That is the number of coronavirus cases reported in Africa. Egypt second with 9,400.
Wow.
Well, I mean, a number of points to be made, you know. If you look at the situation in Nigeria, they say charity begins at home.
Yes.
You will see that the death toll appears to be rising in Nigeria. About 2 weeks ago, we talked about a 4% death rate in Nigeria. But if you look at the figures now, with about 143 deaths
yes,
compared to 778 discharged and total number of 4,399, you see that the death toll has been rising. What is responsible for this? Is there something that we should be doing that we are not doing? I know in Lagos says, oh, they have discharged quite a substantial number of persons. But if you compare with Ghana, you know, when Ghana restricted relaxed the lockdown. Yes, some people said the figures, the confirmed cases in Ghana went up. But if you look at it, Ghana with 22 deaths and having done more testing than Nigeria, you know, does not have the same number of deaths as we have. If you look at South Africa, South Africa's death rate has also not gone up. Egypt has done more testing than Nigeria.
Yes.
But we are, in terms of death rate, death toll, almost at the same level as Egypt. I think that we have reached a point now in Nigeria where we need to take a second look at our strategy and try to see, you know, what the situation is. If it is true, as the Commissioner of Health in Lagos is saying, that death toll in Lagos alone is likely to rise to about 120,000 by July, then of course you can imagine that the death rate is also going to go up, particularly from reports that we are also getting from Bauchi, Yobe, and Kano State.
Certainly.
The second thing is about the Amajiri. Now, over the weekend, there were concerns across Nigeria about Amajiris being brought to the south. For example, in Kwara State, 200 Amajiris were sent back to the north.
Same as crossing.
In Kaduna State, we saw the governor, you know, in fact, turning himself into a bus conductor and trying to check, climbing a truck to go and check whether there was human cargo that had been brought to Kaduna State. That's how serious the situation is. Now, that again raises identity problems, draws our attention to the identity crisis that we have in Nigeria. Who is the Amajiri? Do we even know, do we have data to identify who these Amajiris are? Right? They talk in Lagos about area boys. They don't talk about Amajiri in Lagos. But there's also a large population of unidentifiable, unemployed, underemployed, homeless, stateless people on the streets of Lagos called area boys. Now, do we have any data to be able to identify them? So part of what we are seeing, some of the lessons we're learning, is that to be able to deal with this crisis, we need to look at a number of other issues. Now, the federal government is also talking about school feeding. I thought I read a story about that over the weekend. Who are they going to feed at a time when every school is shut down?
Yes.
Who is feeding who? Which schools? Are they going to feed them online?
Or maybe they plan on...
Can food be transported online to children who are at home? So a number of questions have been raised, and I think we need to address some of those questions. Now, the other issue, of course, is the big leadership question that we have been confronted with. Take, for example, in Rivers State over the weekend, the governor turned himself into the court, the accuser,
the judge and
the jury.
Yes.
To borrow that phrase quickly from you. He was seizing vehicles. He was threatening to auction vehicles. He even demolished 2 hotels.
Yeah, 2 hotels.
And he's relying on executive order. An executive order is just an administrative handmaiden. It's not superior to the Constitution. Now, the kind of impunity, the kind of tyranny, the kind of abuse of fundamental human rights that we have seen in Rivers State over the weekend is not supported by the law. And I think, again, these governors need to be told that they cannot go beyond the law in insisting that they want to save Nigerian lives. What happened in Rivers State, I think, is condemnable, which is unacceptable, and I hope that the persons whose buildings were demolished will seek redress appropriately through the legal channels. Because, look, instead of demolishing people's buildings, you could have sealed up the building. You could sue the owners to court if you insist that they violated the executive order, so-called, that the governor said he put in place. After all, in Lagos, that was not the situation. And then in Lagos, we faced a very serious situation, as we face also perhaps in Gombe, and also in Bauchi, and also perhaps in Yobe. The Lagos State government is saying the numbers are likely to go to about 120,000. Now, the bed space capacity in Lagos is not up to 600. So if the numbers go up, where will Lagos State government keep this?
Well, that's the thing, because most of the cases that we are seeing are mild to moderate cases, and that is why the government had to look into exploring the option of allowing people who are positive with mild cases to stay at home and isolate at home, because the honest truth is there are not going to be enough bed spaces at all. So we have to look at other options like that in order for us to cater to people that are positive with COVID-19 cases. What's your view on all of this as well? Because global trajectories really and truly show that we have not reached our peak. We are very far from our peak right now.
Now, looking at it, at the moment, Doctor just pointed on something very, 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 very pertinent here. And we've seen it play out in the U.S. as in regards to how every governor wants to handle the COVID-19 cases in their own segment. Because if we look at it closely, we've seen governors in Nigeria, for example. All right, we've been talking about leadership and how it will help in actually curbing this COVID-19. In Kogi State, for example, it was really, really sad that we heard about the face-off between the governor and the NCDC workers that actually went there. And at the same time, we've seen what is happening in Cross River State, quite different from what we see, what is happening in Bauchi State, and also what is happening in Lagos State. And we need to be able to have a very, very, I think, a uniform approach to COVID-19. River states are doing they are approaching it from the way they feel is the best way for their own citizenry. At the same time, Lagos State is approaching it from another different point of view, and it's all causing a lot of confusion.
Because there is one common enemy, and at the end of the day, what we need to call for, like we continuously say, is solidarity. That's the only way to get through this. But Aaron, thank you for today's updates, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.